So welcome this morning. We are going to be covering today Microsoft Entra and a bit of a deep dive into the identity, threat landscape. So just wanted to introduce myself and the rest of the panelists. So I'm Stephen Parker. I'm a security solutions architect at CWSI. I'm joined by Aileen and Karim, who are security compliance and identity technical specialists, both at Microsoft. So thanks for joining me this morning, guys.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
So our agenda today, just wanted to give you a brief introduction to CWSI if you're not familiar with us. And then I'll be covering a couple of slides on the current identity threat landscape. Then I'll be handing over to Karim, who'll be discussing around Microsoft Entra Suite, and then Aileen will carry on that and cover some of the other features in the Entra Suite, and then we'll look at some next steps, and then just do a quick wrap up. So in terms of questions, if you can drop them into the chat window, and what we're going to do is cover those questions at the end of the session, if that's okay for everybody. Cool. So from a CWSI, so our aim at CWSI really is to enable the world to work securely from anywhere, be that on any application, on any device, any network, so without any compromises. So as a background, if you didn't know, CWSI was founded in 2011 in Dublin. We've got 135 employees across 5 European countries. And we've got a global customer base, and we specialize in managing and securing hybrid work environments. So we have 4 main pillars to our business. We have our GRC pillar, which is looking at, the regulations and the primary, and those are the primary drivers around governance, risk, and compliance. And so we can assist in navigating this ever-evolving regulatory landscape to ensure that you remain compliant and secure. And we've got services such as regulatory mapping, or we can look at the deployment of Microsoft Purview into your environment for DLP controls, for example. Our secure cloud security area provides services that ensure that your cloud tenants secure to the best practice and industry recommended guidelines. And we offer security architecture consulting, reviews, shadow IT discovery and management, and a range of other security and threat intelligence services. Our secure productivity pillar covers the entire device and identity lifecycle. So it helps our customers keep their fleet of endpoints secure. And within that, we've got services such as device procurement, MDM, and identity products for a zero trust architecture. And then our final area is a secure app development. So we've got our own team of software developers who can build custom applications for your business. So those could be mobile applications or web-based applications, whichever you really need. Next slide, please, Kate. Okay, so Microsoft is our key strategic partner. We began our journey with Microsoft back in 2018, and we've built a really strong relationship, and we've got a reputation as a go-to security partner for Microsoft and their customer base. Our team holds over 350 different certifications and credentials with Microsoft, and it's something that we're continuously investing in, and we're currently, so we keep on growing our skill set as the Microsoft technology evolves. We were the first Irish partner to be invited to join MISA, which was something that we were really proud of. And then this slide is just giving you an overview of some of the businesses that we have worked with. So we've got a breadth of experience across all of the different verticals that we could shown in this slide. Next slide, please, Kate. Okay, so I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to discuss about the current threat landscape. So as organizations have moved to the cloud and adopted SaaS applications, identities have become increasingly crucial for accessing resources. And what we're seeing is that cyber criminals are exploiting, legitimate and authorized identities to steal data and access credentials. So if we look at the findings from the latest Microsoft Threat Intelligence report, you can see that the majority of identity attacks, 99% of these are still password attacks in some form, either via phishing, malware, brute force, or spray attacks. And so whilst advances in default security configurations and things like conditional access policies have helped organizations, embrace and move to multi-factor authentication, which has helped block some of these routes, what Microsoft are seeing is that threat actors are shifting their focus and moving away and up the cyber attack chain to attack the infrastructure, to try and bypass authentication, or to exploit applications. And so what they're doing is they're leaning more heavily into adversary in the middle phishing attacks or token thefts. And over the last year, Microsoft has seen 146% rise in these adversary in the middle attacks. Hackers are also taking advantage of abandoned or unmonitored and overprivileged cloud-based applications with secure credentials as a means to access high-value resources. For example, Microsoft has seen source code repositories that have credentials stored within them, such as passwords and certificates. Next slide, please, Kate. And as we're saying, as the organizations move to the cloud, then these threat actors are following them. And if an attacker gains access to an identity in the cloud, they can then manipulate that resource and process that the identity is trusted to access. So that could be email, it could be other cloud services, it could also be some on-premise environments. And in the past, cloud identity compromise was really thought to be reserved for only a handful of advanced and probably, exclusively like state-sponsored actors. But now Microsoft is seeing financially motivated actors like Octotempest and Storm 0539 and Storm 0501, who've shown some really sophisticated competency in the cloud, across a number of different industry verticals. So they're indicating that these statistics are really indicating that more and more threat actors are going to be starting to use these techniques to try and compromise your environments. And the research from Microsoft has shown that there's a really wide range of preparedness against cloud identity abuse within the different verticals. On average, you can see that the defense industrial base is quite prepared, whilst, ironically, the least prepared is the communications industry. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Karim. He's going to talk more about some of the solutions within Microsoft Entra ID and specifically the solutions within Entra Suite and how they can be used to secure and protect environments against these identity threats. Karim.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephen. So good morning, everyone. My name is Karim Fayad, and I'm a technical specialist covering security, compliance, and identity, short for SCI, in Microsoft in the UK market. Now, to build on top of Stephen's point and addressing those defense reports, we understand that identity is key in a lot of attacks, a lot of threats. So we want to make sure that we protect our identities, our authentications and authorizations to those to your resources, to your applications, to your services. So the way we kind of break it down with the fabric solution areas is that we want to first establish what we call zero trust access controls, relying heavily on the principles of zero trust. So assuming breach, always verify explicitly, and use least privilege principles. And we'll touch on a couple of those principles within our services in the Entra Suite later in this PowerPoint. The second, so this is the foundation, which is the zero trust access controls, and then building on top of that foundation, we want to secure access for your employees. So we want to make sure that employees now are accessing multiple services, on-premises services, LOB applications, cloud SaaS applications, whether Microsoft 365 or non-Microsoft applications. So we want to make sure that we secure access regardless of what endpoint or device the user is using and what application or service is being accessed by this user. Also, we want to secure access to your customers and partners. So that comes to if you're serving your customers, if you have certain applications, you are providing some sort of a service to your customers. We want to make sure that we leverage some of those identity capabilities to your external IDs and external entities and vendors. And last but not least, securing access to in any cloud, not just to Microsoft Azure services and Microsoft 365 services. So if we can maybe move on to the next slide, Kate, please. Yeah, thank you. So again, I think this slide kind of breaks down the different Entra or the Entra product family and the different Entra capabilities across those 4 areas, starting off with Entra ID plans P1 and P2 and Entra ID for Office 365 to establish the zero trust and access controls. So you're probably familiar with the majority of those services. Synchronizing your identity, giving your users a one set of credentials, so to speak, to be able to access both worlds, the on-premises world and the Office 365 and non-Microsoft cloud SaaS applications, leveraging some of those security controls and functionality to be able to manage passwords, to be able to challenge users with multi-factor authentication, or 2FA enforce what we call passwordless authentication, and also leverage some of those amazing security controls like conditional access and some of those identity governance features that my colleague Aileen will be talking about later in the PowerPoint. The second pillar, which will be the pillar that we'll focus on today, which is securing access for your employees, comes in, as you can see, a lot of products and services, so 5 to be precise. We'll touch base on the majority of those today just to see how we can secure access to your employees across different scenarios, whether these are applications hosted on premises, applications that are M365 cloud apps, or internet traffic in general and third-party cloud applications. And securing your access to customers and partners comes in Microsoft External ID. Again, some scenarios there with our B2B collaborations or B2C, we can support with those kind of services with Entra. And last but not least, Entra permissions management and Entra workload ID to help you secure access to any cloud. So if we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, and again, as I mentioned, we'll focus primarily today on securing access to your employees. So very, very quickly, I'm covering today the network side of things when it comes to securing access to your employees. So that mainly is Microsoft Entra private access and internet access, and we'll be covering the rest with Aileen, or some of those at least today with Aileen, just to kind of talk more about securing access with Entra ID governance and identity protection. Perfect. So Entra Suite, and I think the way to approach this slide, in my opinion, I like to start from the right-hand side, and before kind of jumping into the experience and what we're trying to explain here is that back in the day, everything lived on the corporate network, right? So applications, devices, and ultimately data lived on the corporate network. So as time has gone on, applications shifted from on-premises to cloud. Users now work from any location, and the security products that vendors really have spent many years building and defining, almost became obsolete overnight. And when COVID happened, IT departments needed to make stuff work remotely for everyone, and it caused problems, right? So just like with any cloud service, you no longer are defined by restraints around stuff routing back to your corporate network for security appliances to do the thing. So with this slide, I'll start from the right-hand side very quickly. Is we do have different kinds of applications, and we know with the Entra Suite and specifically the network side of things, we do have 3 different dedicated tunnels depending on the type of applications and resources you're trying to secure. So we have a tunnel dedicated to your M365 applications and services. We have a tunnel dedicated to your internet traffic and your non-Microsoft SaaS applications. And we have a tunnel dedicated for your private applications and on-premises applications. And very quickly to talk about these kind of deployments, and just give a, and we can definitely follow up with more information and content. There's different types of deployment models. So we support device client deployment model, and also we support what we call a network branch deployment model. Most of the customers that I've seen, or the vast majority of customers that I've seen, will have what we call an agent-based deployment or a device client model deployment. So what that really means is that they're leveraging the agents running on endpoints on the devices. And now the end game really, for us as Microsoft and Windows, is that that agent is built into the operating system. So not a lot of manageability, headache, if I may say, to be able to manage those agents. Now everything is built in within that operating system. So essentially, what will happen is that these endpoints running our agent will, they'll run our agent. They'll create what we call a tunnel to our SSE service. You might have heard the term SSE, which is Security Service Edge, or GCA, Global Secure Access, or Private Access, or Internet Access. They essentially all mean the same thing, and I'll break it down really with private access and internet access in the next couple of slides. So the agent, running our endpoints will create the tunnel to our SSE service, depending on which of these three traffics or profiles that I just mentioned, if it's M365 traffic or internet traffic or private traffic, and then each agent will create an outbound tunnel out of to those endpoints. So over those three tunnels, we will send traffic based on what we call a per application perspective over those three output tunnels. So if we can go to the next slide, if that's okay, Kate. So now, and again, I'll address really some of those use case scenarios with private access and internet access later, but I just wanted to highlight that, what's the power in this, right? So with Entra Suite, really, the idea is to be able to leverage and unify conditional access, some of those security access controls that we offer within Entra, Identity and Access Management Solution, Entra ID Premiums, leverage those across any application, anywhere, or any resource within your organization. Also, as I mentioned, and Aileen will touch base on that in more details in the identity governance piece, leveraging the concept of least privilege access. We don't want to give excessive access to resources, to applications. We want to make sure that we're embracing the zero trust model at Microsoft. Again, we're trying as much as possible to improve that user experience, that boosting productivity, performance, and reliability with our services, and try to reduce that on-premises footprint, meaning that we don't want, usually customers, they have to purchase legacy, maybe sometimes legacy services, legacy VPN solutions, on-premises infrastructure of some sort. So you need to manage that separately from a different IDP, Entra, most cases, and they need to update it, they need to maintain it. So lots of work in there that we can definitely manage with our SSE services and Entra Suite capabilities. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, just kind of talking more about Microsoft Entra private access. So again, the idea of today is to kind of give a flavor of what these services and suite of solutions offer. So starting off with the first one, which is private access. Again, the idea of private access is to secure access to all your private applications and resources for any users with what we call an identity-centric zero trust network access, also known as ZTNA. Again, ZTNA is built on zero trust principles. It removes the risks and complexities of legacy VPNs to boost user productivity. So maybe a little story there as well. Some of my customers are leveraging some of those functionalities in Entra already, like Azure AD Application Proxy. And once we publish Application Proxy, really it was great. Customers really loved it. It meant that you can publish your applications, you can federate your applications to Entra ID, leverage some of those security controls for LOB applications, non-Microsoft third-party applications like GCP maybe, or Box or Dropbox, or any third-party cloud application, and leverage some of those security functionalities like single sign-on experience, like conditional access to those applications. So if I may say, Azure AD Application Proxy is an early version of private access. So private access is an advanced version, if I may say, of Azure AD Application Proxy, which means that now the difference really, or the limitation was with Application Proxy, is that it was only covering mainly web applications, right? And now with private access, we can manage a broad level of support of applications, so we can provide a security to all private applications, any application, any protocol that are web-based or non-web-based protocols. So we can support protocols like RDPs, we can support protocols like SSH, SMB, FTPs, file transfer protocols, printers. So lots of examples there of applications and protocols that can be supported with private access. Now, from an identity-centric security controls, I mentioned that you can, once you leverage and onboard some of those applications with private access, you can leverage and use conditional access and a single sign-on experience for those applications. You can also leverage what we call CAE, or continuous access evaluation. Now, what continuous access evaluation really is, it's our real near real-time revocation capability, and the job of it is to make sure that when a scenario happens, we need to revoke a token, application access is revoked as close as real time as possible. Now, CAE is not new, right? It's been around for a few years independently of our SSE service, or Global Secure Access Service. And the big challenge really with CAE is that everything needs in the chain needs to know about CAE. So from a client app point of view, it needs to know about CAE. That is running on that client workstation. The back end needs to know about CAE. The IDP needs to know about CAE. So in this case, it's in our case, it's Entra ID. So there's no problem there. And no problem there at all when it manages, when Entra ID manages that. But the problem really is that a handful of applications only support CAE today, right? So, for example, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Teams, and even those applications, there's a separate client application matrix that is needed. So, for example, in Exchange, I'll give an example of Exchange, a very common example. We got a bunch of email clients that can run on endpoints, right? So if a customer is using a client that does not support a CAE, a token should be revoked, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to, and the access will continue on that platform for that device. Now, so you might be wondering, so it's been around for a few years, so why are we speaking about CAE in an SSE type conversation? And the reason is because when you access these applications over our new SSE service in private access, those limitations essentially go away, and we now have agents running on those endpoints. So meaning we act as a broker and essentially support all applications. So M365 applications will be supported by CAE. Third-party SaaS applications will be supported by CAE. And as you can guess from private access, your private applications will also be supported by CAE. Now, very quickly, just to give, I'm not going to touch based on all the services and features there, conscious of time. So I'll very quickly just to highlight a few. So supporting SSO to private applications, using header-based authentication, SAML, and Kerberos. We can segment app access or per app access. So again, enabling access to specific apps as opposed to giving access to the full network with a VPN solution. Some of the functionality that we offer within private access as well is app discovery and onboarding. So once we connect it to your private network via private access, we can discover private applications and we can support with segmenting them and onboarding them to your end users. And last but not least, some of the features that are in development as we speak is what we call intelligent local access, to be able to give what we call adaptive local access to private applications for your hybrid users as well. So maybe if we can move on to the next slide, which is basically a demo that I've put together to kind of show really private access in play. So yeah, let's see if it's working. Very good. So just to kind of explain, we got a device on on the internet. As you can see, I'll try to ping one of my internal resources, and just kind of check. So I'll open the command prompt. I'll try to ping that internal resource, and it's going to time out. And the reason why it's going to time out is because I'm not on the corporate network, and of course I cannot access this website. So what most users would realize, I need to turn on my VPN. So I'll go to my VPN solution, turn on my VPN, and now once I turn on my VPN, I'll try to ping the application again, or I'll try to access the application, and I have access to my internal resource. Right. So I can also ping that web server, and this is one of the most common pain points with a lot of customers that have these legacy VPN solutions. They give access to the network, and a lot of customers are looking to move away from these types of connectivity models. So with some very basic IT skills, you can download one of the many scanners on the internet. You can run what we call a port scan and quickly identify what else is available on the network for me to connect to ports and so on and so forth. So again, a very common pain point across customers. So now that I've accessed my web application, now once I've got on the VPN connected, so I log in here, and I'm logging into my firewall, illustrating one of the key points of how these traditional VPN servers work. They need to have an inbound firewall rule to your VPN endpoint. Now with private access and application proxy, it's different. No inbound firewall connectivity is needed for that specific scenario. Right, so what we're going to do here is that we're going to turn off the old stuff, the VPN client. We're going to turn it off, and then we're going to try to turn on our SSE agent, and it got in green, and you can see here the application, it was seamless, it loaded seamlessly. But when I try to ping the application, I no longer can ping this application, and the reason why, because we only allowed port 80 for that specific application with our global secure access settings. Another scenario is if you're trying to access a file server or a map drive of some sort. What I did here is that I just went to a start run UNC path, and you can see here first kind of glimpse of modern authentication stuff happening. So I had a conditional access policy to make this experience work in a passwordless fashion. You can see here the terms of use, a great feature to have and have already with Entra ID capabilities. You can leverage those. And now you can see that we acquired the traffic. We presented the modern authentication experience for the user to do passwordless. And now the user is in the file server accessing files and folders. The last part of the demo is for is for a non-admin user trying to access a domain controller via an RDP session. Now, the reason why I made a point about calling out a non-admin user is that for those who are familiar with on-premises AD, you'll know that non-admin users or users on-premises AD, they don't have the rights to connect to a domain controller or DC, right? So what actually happened there is that I essentially had my domain credentials saved in the RDP file. So if I didn't have my domain admin credentials saved in the RDP file, the experience would have been private actors basically just said, left the user on the DC log screen, and I could then enter whatever credentials I had to access that resource. Now, sometimes customers might have, and the reason why I'm highlighting this scenario is that sometimes customers might have applications that are not tied into Entra ID, and they might be using a local account database of some sort, or there might be could be a firewall or maybe a network or security devices, and they can still protect those devices and applications with private access. If we can maybe move on to the next slide, just to kind of cover a little bit of internet access and talk more about some of those functionalities and services within internet access. Right, so internet access, part of the Entra Suite, part of our SSE experience or global secure access, and this is basically your secure web gateway service. So who basically defining who can access what type of sites, based on categories, based on fully qualified domain names or FQDNs. And the solution basically what we're trying to do is that we're trying to, first of all, improve end user experience. So we're boosting user productivity with the best in class availability, reliability, and performance. What we're trying to do really here is just we're trying to eliminate extra hops to optimize traffic routing to M365 services, and also avoid what we call traffic hairpins to branch VPNs. So we want to make sure that that kind of reliability and that kind of experience is seamless. Measurable reports of the network. So we do provide measurable performance with M365 network connectivity performance reports, just to kind of explain more about that performance point within internet access. Now, some of the, I'll touch base on some of those functionalities and values that you would get out of internet access. So one of them would be what we call restoration of original source IP, or source IP restoration, known as source IP restoration. And just to give a little bit of a background here of why this is a thing and why this matters to customers that are running, might have an existing SSE type of solution or a secure web gateway solution. Now, the way web proxies and specifically cloud-based web proxies work, they require traffic to be acquired from the device and then sent to some web proxy service running on the cloud out there on the internet. Now, traffic will then go from the cloud service to us in our data centers, and the key part in the connection is going to be via that third-party cloud service. So now this creates a couple of problems really for customers from a logging perspective. So if the Microsoft, us as Microsoft Cloud, we will see a Zscaler IP addresses, we will see a Palo Alto IP addresses, Cisco IP addresses, and that's not good for customers that are using these services. And the public IP where the sign-ins are coming from, we cannot log as Microsoft, so we cannot see those. So enabling internet access fixes the logging problem essentially, and also fixes the issue that we get from a risk assessment point, because now we cannot use the trillions of signals that we collect from our threat intelligence platforms, defended XDR platforms, reports and assessments like a malicious IP or a bad IP address point of view in conditional access. We just see their third-party IP addresses in our logs. So essentially, internet access makes this problem go away. Now, some other protection and threat protection capabilities that is offered with internet access is what we call preventing token theft and replay attacks. So again, across authentication plans, what we do is that we extend our compliant functionalities and services to compliant network checks with our conditional access policies. And last but not least, protecting against data exfiltration. So, from unauthorized foreign tenants, leveraging and enabling a feature, back in the day used to be called tenant restrictions. Now it's called universal tenant restrictions. We worked on some of those gaps that we had with the service. Now the service is up and running, covering, agnostic of network branches, agnostic of operating systems, agnostic of browser platforms as well. So it's very powerful to be able to protect your environment from any data exfiltration if logging from with a foreign domain or a foreign ID of some sort or a foreign tenant. So in summary, internet access is designed to secure access to all internet SaaS and M365 apps and resources while protecting your organization against internet threats, malicious network traffic, and unsafe or non-compliant content. So some of those functions that I mentioned, the restoration, the IP restoration experience, universal tenant restriction experience. Again, we provide with internet access, we provide web content filtering experience as well, so you can filter sites based on categories and content. We can definitely deliver that. Additional features that will be coming soon that are being tested as we speak is TLS and SSL inspection, and to make sure that we give you the best-in-class protection to your internet resources and applications. With that, I'll hand it over to Aileen to walk us through the rest of the Entra Suite, identity protection and identity governance. So Aileen, back to you.
Super, lovely. Thanks a million, Karim. So Aileen Finlay here. I'm a technical specialist as well as Microsoft, security, compliance and identity areas I cover. So just as Karim went through there, looking at the full suite, we looked at the internet access, private access. There is a verified ID part that we won't go through today. The areas I'm going to look at are governance and protection. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, within P2, there already is elements of governance and of protection in that. What the suite will do, it will extend that level of governance and that level of protection, really powerful through whether it's machine learning, through AI, logic apps, we'll have a kind of visibility of a dashboard. I'm going to take you through all of them, but before I do, I want you to just look at like a user journey and how complex the user journey has become over, I would say, even over the last decade of what we need to do with an identity and what a user needs to do. So simply first, and I suppose Microsoft like confusing us with the different name changes that they have. So if we look at what's called Entra ID, it's basically your Azure ID, Active Directory, all of that has evolved and now called an Entra ID. An Entra ID, what we do is from a HR system, when an employee comes on board an organization, we add them into our HR system, whether it's Workday, SuccessFactors, or whatever it is. But we've got a generic connector that we can take those and we can provision those within Entra. And while we're provisioning those within Entra, we want to take the attributes with them as well. So it might be like hire date, finish date, or whatever attributes they are. So we bring them across and we're able to see them. And what we want to do from there is we want to be able to give users access to certain resources. So we look down here and whatever resources they need access to, and we want to give them the roles that they should have and what access they should have within the organization, whether they need to be on those particular resources, an administrator or a user, and exactly what they can do. What we would have looked at from a user journey years ago, we would have like tended to happen was an admin would say, oh, that person has the role, you know, Aileen's coming on as that particular role. Let's just copy over the permissions they have and give Aileen those permissions. In scenarios like this, we are going to have different locations in organizations. I might be located in Dublin, Karim might be located in London. We might just have different elements of what we're allowed access. So looking at a user journey, it has become more complex. Who can access what? Should they have just-in-time access? Should they have full access 24/7? Would that open up an area, 24-hour access? Does that open up a huge gap to threat actors? And that's where our protection components come in. So this is a more complicated scenario. I'm going to take it through the two parts. And what I'm going to do, because governance is in your plan 2, I'm going to stop at different parts and tell you what we have enhanced in governance and what we've put into the suite. So the additional parts you're going to get in that suite. So we'll just move to the next slide and just have a look at exactly where we are today from a governance perspective. I'll just get you to move on to the next slide there. Okay, so actually we'll look at identity protection first. So looking at identity protection, if we look at like, let's say for instance, our risky sign-ins or what way a user behaves. So let's say from an analytics, if we have analytics working in the background to see who a risky user is, where they're located. So for example, if I logged in, Aileen logged in Dublin today, and 2 hours later I logged in Australia, that's impossible travel, and that would be marked down as a risky sign-in, where we would gather those particular signals and we'd be able to make decisions based on bringing in conditional access to say, okay, you know, this is not possible, and whatever actions you would have beyond that, whether to say, okay, in that particular example, you wouldn't say, okay, MFA or whatever, you'd probably want to block or have some kind of strict condition in that place to ensure that I cannot go any further, I cannot access what I'm trying to access. So the improvements within your identity protection would be around machine learning, around different AI, and bringing all of those components together to give a better decision process around what we would do to protect those identities. So for anything like if I decided tomorrow, okay, my credentials within Microsoft, I'm using other, you know, I'm shopping online and I want to use my credentials online, and I start to use my credentials through, let's say, Tesco doing some shopping, I use my Microsoft credentials, which I wouldn't do, but let's say we do. If those credentials were leaked from Tesco and we had all the intelligence we had in the background, Microsoft can see, okay, Aileen's actually part of a leak. It is our Microsoft credentials. She's trying to log in tomorrow. We can see that there is a leak out there. Aileen needs to change her password, or Aileen needs to perform a password change and an MFA, and then that makes Aileen's account more secure. So that's more of the elements of, you already have your protection there in P2, but there is some additional elements that you're going to get with the suite. But the bigger elements are more in your governance side. I'm going to move on to the next slide and show you what elements you're going to have from a governance perspective as well. So if we look at governance and governing those identities, what access they can have, how we can build in tasks to be able to, let's say, onboard a user. So if we're pre-onboarding a user, we probably have to consider, okay, you know, we want to send an email to that user's manager. We want to set up a temporary access passcode, so the manager will have that temporary access passcode. We probably want to connect in with something like ServiceNow and possibly create a ticket in that system and order new hardware, whether that's a laptop or whatever we need to order. But those logic apps, so the logic app workflow that you will have as an additional task within your governance area is an additional part that you will have in that Entra Suite, where you have the ability now to create these logic apps where you can connect in with your ServiceNow or whatever other ticketing system you have, and you're able to create these workflows to say, okay, when I'm pre-onboarding a particular person, I want to be able to do these external tasks as well, and that's where that will come in, and that's where that will save time as well. So if we move to the next slide there, I'm just going to give you an example of other areas we can see from a governance point of view. So this is completely new. The dashboard that you're going to see is going to be within your additional Entra Suite. So anything in this dashboard, you're going to have a full visibility into seeing anything from like how many members were created and recently how many members you create. What type of members are they? Are they guest users? Are they internal users? Are they B2B, B2C? Any of those users that you can see, you'll have this full visibility here. What assignments do they have? So what exactly can they do? And is there access packages? So over time, as we evolve, we want to look at a sense of like joiners, movers and leavers. So I come into the organization and I come in as Aileen and I might be working in HR for the first year. What tends to happen is I continue to get more and more access as I move on, and the access isn't taken away from me. What we want to do is have access reviews and be able to monitor particular areas of the business to say, okay, Aileen has moved on. We want to create an access review, whether the access review is for Aileen to state she no longer needs this access and she has to respond within 30 days, otherwise the access is revoked, or whether there's an approval flow in place that, you know, this goes to her manager and our manager has to approve, say, yes, Aileen is still within my organization. She still needs access to these areas of the business. So this is going to give you a full understanding of your identity landscape and exactly what you need to do, and basically a level of kind of coaching to say what you need to do next. You set up this amount of users, could there be any stale guest users, or what you should do next, or what access reviews you should set up next here. So just beyond this, we'll just go to the next slide there. I'm going to bring you into a scenario where we're going to look at a joiner scenario. So in our early days of onboarding a user, it could take days or even weeks for you to have everything in place to actually get the job done. Onboarding a new user, as I said, you can pre-onboard a new user, and we would typically advise like pre-onboarding a new user when you bring over and when you provision all your accounts from, let's say, your HR system. We would typically say they should probably be disabled, your user should be disabled. And with some of these tasks that we create, that we would say enable that user on day one. And that just avoids somebody that if they didn't start on day one, or the contract that you had coming in, that you don't have all of these additional users out there, that these users are disabled by default, setting up, and then when you add on these workflows, that these workflows will actually enable these particular users there. So if we look at, like, as I said, a typical onboarding scenario, you're going to have to get access to different resources. You probably have to be requesting different access for a couple of days, a couple of weeks. With a joiner scenario here, and what I'm going to show you with an onboarding scenario here, it's basically rinse and repeat templates. You're going to be looking at different templates. You're going to be able to set tasks in those templates, and you're going to be able to simply onboard your users within one day, within a couple of hours. You'll see how simply it is to get a user onboarded. So let's move. I'm going to just show you a quick demo here of setting up your governance and setting up a workflow. So if we just go into governance here, we're in our Entra portal and we go into workflows, and I'm going to create a new workflow. So the workflow I'm going to create is I'm going to onboard pre-hire employee. So let's select, so there's many templates here that you can use. So let's select this particular one, an onboard pre-hire employee. We're just going to create the name here, and this will be for Washington, and marketing department in Washington. We care description. Notice down the end where I have my attribute. The attribute is start day. I want this to run 7 days before that user starts, so that we get 7 days in advance. We're going to just do the department here, and it's a marketing department. And we're going to add a further rule here around location, and the location is Washington. So let's just review the tasks that are already set there. We can modify any of these, or we can set new ones. This is just a temporary access code that's going to be sent to the manager before that user joins. We can see this is all set, and we're going to add one new task. And this is the additional feature you're going to have in the suite. And we're going to run a custom task extension. You'll see here when we add tasks, if there's any kind of caution symbols, it just means you just have to add additional criteria here. We're going to add the market and department, and we're going to go into the run task custom extension. And this is where we're going to add a service now, hardware procurement. Okay, and we're just going to review this and enable that schedule. And that's created. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at another one here that's an onboarding one. So we've done a pre-onboard, and we hope that that will order the hardware, that will send a temporary access password to the manager. But now we look at what's already created for people that are onboarded and what we can see in tasks here. So enable user accounts. So as I said, we do not have them enabled until they come on board, day one maybe. Add user to a team and send welcome email. So we go into send welcome email. You can see here. We'll just make sure what users are added, and the email customization here. You can customize any of these here to make sure that the welcome email they'll get on day one is going to look like this. And what we'll do is just check the different versions of this particular workflow, and any changes that has been made can be checked here. So this will give a good understanding of what has happened, the versions here, exactly when they were changed and what scope, and all of the details around that particular workflow there. There's also an audit history, so any tasks that have ran. So if we look at different users and look at the workflow history, and let's say we go into Andrew, it just shows from Andrew was onboarded, did all of his tasks run, or did any tasks fail? So all of his tasks were completed, but if we go down to Penelope down here, we can see for some odd reason, one of our tasks did not complete, temporary access passcode, so we would have to go in and investigate that. We can look at a full audit log here. And what the audit log will do, it will just give us full information of exactly why that failed, what happened, and what we need to do to change that. So it gives you full insight to exactly what happened. But I think the key area here is the additional components you have with the workflow lifecycle, that you can now bring in components like you can use like a Logic app to set up your service now and bring in that ticketing system as well. The other area that is, I suppose, important in an access review is an access review is going to run periodically. So it's going to, you know, over time. So when we set up that user and Aileen comes on board, and whether I was pre-onboarded and then I was onboarded properly and my account was enabled and everything happened that needed to happen for day one, it has to be assumed that I might not stay the same for the life cycle that I'm in that organization, and that they want to review me and see when I change or if I move within the organization and I come from HR and I move into maybe a sales department. Should Aileen still have the same access Aileen has had? And that's when we look into like a more mover profile, and that's when it takes the attributes from your workday or your HR system to say, okay, the attribute is Aileen has moved department, and because of that attribute, we're going to fire off a mover workflow so that Aileen has different, her access is revoked that she had, and she has new access. What's really important in doing that is it can save a lot of money, because what happens is if I continue to collect not only money from a licensing perspective, but also protection, because I don't want to collect and be privileged and continue to gain more privilege as I move through the organization. But what can happen as well, I have particular access to particular areas. I'm also licensed for those areas. I'm no longer in those areas anymore, and I've moved on. The different tasks you can run from, let's say, a mover perspective, you can revoke licenses. So you can set a task to say, when Aileen moves, please revoke the licenses that she doesn't need on the systems that she's not using anymore, and free up those licenses so that when somebody else comes along, those licenses are there. A lot of the time what people do is they move along with the same access, and they move along with the licenses that they no longer need. And you're going out then looking at what licenses do we need and purchasing more licenses. Another area which is the machine learning side of access reviews, and this is a new area that's within the Entra Suite as well. That's not going to be in your P2 licenses, and that's added onto governance to increase how you're going to set these lifecycle workflows and access reviews. It's called your affiliation, so group to user affiliation. So there's either high affiliation, low affiliation. What we're doing is we're using machine learning to look at, Karim has all of this access, and Karim is able to access, you know, all of the same components that like more privileged users have, like more users that are in the IT department, but yeah, Karim is now in the HR department. Should he still have this access? So you want to kind of affiliate them to the org and see exactly what access they're using. And if they move through the org, that there's a kind of machine learning and there's an understanding in the background that we can see he's no longer in that org. This org says that they have access to these areas of the business. However, he still has access to these areas of business. I want to give you a recommendation to say, should he still have access? And you can see in the second screen here, the reviewer visibility. So as a reviewer, you will see, okay, we can see there's low affiliation with Karim here. Should he really still have access to these areas? And this is where you can allow or deny or look at these recommendations and see, should there still be access to these areas of the business? So that's a new feature as well that's in the Intune suite. We'll just go to the next one. What you'll see now is just the different tasks that come up. So this is a full window of basically all the tasks you can run. So depending on what you're going to do in the JML process, so whether it's join or move or leave, there's going to be categories of different tasks you can run within those workflows. And what you can do, as I said, the important ones are, you know, whether you want to use logic apps, whether you want to bring in third party like a ServiceNow and have that workflow to create a ticket, or whether you want to revoke licenses that somebody might have because they no longer need those licenses. But this list is basically a list that continues to evolve. So as you know your business evolves, we add more tasks to this and show you exactly what you can do or the power you can have within any of the JML process and the tasks that you can create to get either your users up and running right away, to move your users across and revoke any access, or to offboard users and to wipe devices, or what you need to do to get those users offboarded and take away the access that they have. Okay, we'll just jump to the next slide. So on this one, I'm going to show you in access review that what it does, it wants to look at stale accounts. So you had a lot of guest users coming in. You don't want to have guest users and just leave guest users there without actually checking, should they still be in the system? When was the last time they logged in? And what can we do to get rid of these now? So what we're doing is going to create an access review. So for guest users only. And what we can do down here, there is a checkbox, inactive users on tenant. So if we look at who is inactive, we're going to be able to state the dates or the days, how long they've been inactive on that tenant. Okay, we're going to select reviewers and we're going to let them review it themselves, which means that if they don't come back, that means obviously they're inactive, and we will stay after a certain period of time. We'll take away the access, then we'll delete the account after 30 days. And then, as you know, after 30 days, that account can be re-enabled after those 30 days. But we want someone to come back to us and the user to come back within 30 days so that we can state, right, they are still active, they've just been off on long leave or however. There is an option as well to set approvers in here. So you could say, okay, I want to have a stage of approvers, like management approving this. I don't want user approval, I want management approval on this. You'd have the different stages there as well. So there's different options. Down here, you'll see the tick box here for user to group affiliation. That's where I was stating, if this is ticked, this is where your machine learning will come in, and that's the extra option you're getting in your Entra Suite. So that's where it's going to affiliate them, high affiliation, low affiliation, use that machine learning. So we'll just name this here. So clean up stale accounts. And this will basically create your access review there. I'm conscious of time, Kate, so we might move on to the next slide. I know, Stephen, you still have areas you want to cover at the end, but this is going to set up your, basically set up your access review and make sure it's checking. So it's periodically checking, is there any stale accounts there? What do we do under stale accounts? What tasks do we bring in? What do we need to do there? And exactly how you want to customize it. Just to give you an idea, I know Karim, the areas that Karim went into and your private access, your internet access, it's very obvious in the Entra Suite that there are extra components that are going to be only in the Entra Suite, verified ID as well. You're not seeing any of these in P2. The areas that I covered are areas that are going to enhance your governance and going to enhance your protection. So like your logic apps, the governance portal that you see, the user to group affiliation, and there's loads of other small components in there. You already have your governance in P2, but your Entra Suite is going to enhance that. But what we're looking at here is a full family of what you can do and eliminate, and the areas you can eliminate looking at the Microsoft Intune Suite. So some customers we know and we work with could have 5 different products that they're working with, trying to do exactly what our Entra Suite can do, where they can eliminate them and just use your Microsoft Suite. go to the next slide there. This just shows where we are in the market. We did start off as an IAM, so Identity and Access Manager. We are leading in that space. Although we're not only an IAM anymore, we have the governance, we have the security, we have the access, we have literally a collection now and a full suite within our Entra. So it just shows where we're seeing out there on the market and how long we are a leader out there in the access management space. So that's from a Gartner independent research there. I think the last part is just around licensing. I did give you an idea that a lot of what you see, apart from Karim's part, isn't a P2, but the enhancements that I showed there are in your Entra Suite, as well as your SSE, and you'll have your verified ID as well in that. There is trials for this, so if you do want to look at it from a trial perspective, we can offer that. And I know Stephen has different areas that he wants to talk about around what CWSI can offer from resources and trials from here on. I'll pass back over to Stephen.
Thanks, Aileen. Yeah, so I guess as a call to action, if you're interested in exploring, like any of these, like solutions further, if you use this QR code, then you can request a free identity assessment from CWSI. So essentially what we look at during that assessment is, so what features you're currently using, what you're currently licensed for and the entitlement within that license, and it's like if there are features that you aren't using or taking advantage of, and also then it's like just if you have any like pain points or issues that you're it's like currently experiencing with identity it's like access management, then that's uncovered within the it's like that free assessment. So I'd ask if you're interested, scan this QR code and so I can request so this identity assessment. Just so I've got a couple of minutes, so there was some questions that came in, so just wanted to ask those. So I think one for you, Karim, are there any like prerequisites to use the Microsoft Internet Access and the private access features?
So from a prerequisite standpoint, I think that the only thing that needs to have, well, a couple of things. First, you need to have a minimum of an Entra ID Plan 1 or Plan 2 license, so it's built on top of Entra ID. And there's actually an article online that talks more about from a technical standpoint in terms of how to enable the service. You just need to turn it on, basically. So fairly straightforward, very fast time to value, but from a licensing standpoint and a key functionality standpoint, you'll have to have Entra ID P1 minimum. Okay,
cool. Now, I think the other question, one of the main questions that came in, it was around Aileen, for the Entra ID protection. Do you know what criteria are used in the background to trigger those risks?
Yeah, so there is a collection of like anything from that risk would be triggered from different signals that we would collect. So we did switch on that a little bit earlier on around it could be impossible travel, it could be the device is infected. I think there's about 5 or 6 different sets of criteria to what we would state that is risky and that we would want to have, as I said, maybe a conditional access rule or something coming in on the back of that. But yeah, there is a set of criteria. There is a document, I can share that later on, and it's set from impossible travel, a device might be infected, it's an IP address that we don't recognize, and I think there's 2 other ones in there as well.
Okay, thanks. So I think, just conscious of the time, we're at 11 o'clock. So so if you've asked any other questions in the chat, what we'll do is we've got those captured, so we'll come back to you individually on those questions. But just thanks again for attending today's session. I just want to say big thanks to Karim and Aileen for covering the two, those 2 areas that they've done, and just say thank you and have a good day.
Super, guys. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.